Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Amber and today I have another solved true crime case for you guys. This case is absolutely tragic and I had never heard of this case before. One of you guys actually recommended it to me in a comment just recently and it sparked my interest so much that I decided to look into this case, and wow, I cannot believe I've never heard of this before. This case reminds me of the very tragic murder of former model and I believe Playboy Playmate JazminC. If you've never seen that video before, I will leave a link down below and also in a card up above. But it basically was a murder-suicide. And sadly, this is a very similar case, kind of in that aspect. Before we get started, I do want to thank today's sponsor. We actually have another sponsor for this video and I'm so grateful and excited to get sponsors that don't mind their products being on a true crime channel, because as you guys know, this type of content gets demonetized almost instantly and I put a lot of time and effort and work into my channel, so I'm very gracious when I get a sponsor. So today's sponsor is someone that has sponsored a video before, and that is AquaW. It's actually a jewelry company and the necklace stack that I'm wearing is from them. It's absolutely beautiful. This is probably my favorite necklace stack trio, whatever. I'm not very good at pairing things together, and so it came like this. And if you guys remember the necklace that I wore in my Robert Durst finale, it kind of looks like paper clips or safety pins, and it's a coin. I got a lot of compliments on this, so that is also by them. And this ring, I know I'm wearing a bunch of other rings, but they sent me these 3 items, and basically this is, you know, 3 in 1, so basically 5 items. Any coupon codes, links, everything like that will be in the description box down below. I know the holidays are coming up, Hanukkah, Christmas, there's Sagittarius birthdays. I know my birthday's coming up. I'm going to be 81 years old. But yeah, so I just want to thank today's sponsor, because without sponsors like AquaW, these videos wouldn't be as possible to make, because a lot of people don't understand a lot of time and effort and goes into doing these videos, and this is a job, you know what I mean? So as much as this is a passion of mine, it's also a lot of work. So thank you, AquaW, for sponsoring this video. Again, any links to all the jewelry items that are from AquaW will be linked in the description box down below. Today's case is incredibly tragic. Every case I cover is tragic, and let me give you a disclaimer. As with every case that I cover, I mean absolutely no disrespect to any persons involved, friends, family, even the protagonist, the antagonist, the murderer, obviously the victim. I mean no disrespect. I just like to retell these stories because they are true crime stories. Sometimes there are lessons that we can learn from each case and look for warning signs, and oftentimes there's a lot of warning signs. Hindsight is 20/20, and I notice a lot of similarities between this case and the JazminC case, not just because the victims were both beautiful models, but the men that murdered them have a lot of similar qualities. And possibly watching a video like this, recounting Dorothy Stratten's tragic life and, you know, case and murder, possibly it could help another woman, a man, or child look for these signs and maybe possibly avoid something like this. Or if you see somebody that's in a relationship that's like this, you know, maybe step in, help them protect themselves. There's a lot of different things that are available to people nowadays. You can take self-defense classes, you can have mace, you know, have surveillance, just all kinds of different things to protect yourself. Let's get into a little bit of background of Dorothy Stratten. Dorothy Stratten was actually born as Dorothy Ruth Hoogstraten, and she was born on February 28th, 1960. After she started getting into modeling, she did legally change her name to Dorothy Stratten, so I'm going to be referring to her mostly as Dorothy or Dorothy Stratten rather than her original legal name. But she was born in 1960, and unfortunately at the very young, tender age of only 20 years old, she was murdered by her husband. So, this case has a lot of ups and downs. So Dorothy was actually born in Canada. She was a Canadian. I believe that a lot of very talented and beautiful, smart people come from Canada. I mean, the list is endless of Canadian stars. This girl was a beauty from the get-go. Sometimes people get upset when I say they were beautiful. Like, I even did a case where I talked about a little boy and he had like the most beautiful eyes and he went missing, and people were really upset that I was pointing that out. I don't think that someone's beauty inside or out takes away or adds to the tragedy of their story, but it's undeniable that Dorothy was a beautiful girl, inside and out. And like a lot of beautiful young girls, she was very insecure.
People at school would tease her about her lips being so big.
And she thought she was the most ugliest duckling there ever was.
I always looked away when I talked to her or tried to discuss anything with her. She never ever looked, she had never had eye contact.
She felt awkward. She wasn't comfortable in her own skin.
She said, I'll never be beautiful. I saw this beauty in her that she didn't see.
And I do believe she was manipulated and taken advantage of. So she was born in British Columbia, Canada, and her parents' names are Simon and Nellie Hoogstraten, and they actually migrated from the Netherlands. So they were both from the Netherlands, they moved to Canada, and that's where Dorothy was born. She was actually born in the Grace Maternity Hospital in Vancouver, British Columbia. She had two other siblings, a brother named John Arthur, who was born in 1961, and a little sister named Louise Stratton, who was born in May of 1968. So in 1977, Dorothy was attending high school. She was 17 years old. Like a lot of high schoolers, she had a part-time job. She was actually working part-time while she went to high school full-time at a Dairy Queen. So she's working, she's 17 years old, and in walks a man who happens to be 27. It's a man named Paul Snider, who happened to be a local nightclub promoter in the Vancouver area, walks in and is completely smitten with Dorothy. Now, Paul Snider is referred to someone who was very into these get-rich-quick schemes. These are just hearsay opinions. They're not here to defend themselves today. So I'm just going off of the documentaries that I've watched, the articles that I've read, and the research that I've done. So he allegedly spotted Dorothy. Now, Dorothy, like I said, when she was younger, she said that nobody would ever love her, that she was ugly. I guess the kids used to make fun of her because she had really big, beautiful, voluptuous lips. Nowadays, you know, girls, you know, a lot of people pay a lot of money to have beautiful lips like that, but she was just a natural beauty, but she was very insecure. So like I said, Paul Snider really wanted to be famous. He wanted to have a lot of money, and it is said that as soon as he saw Dorothy, even though she was super insecure, he thought that he saw a lot of potential in her as far as being able to make money off of her. Now, it's also said that besides being a club promoter, he was also a pimp, and when him and Dorothy started dating, people had warned her and had said, hey, you need to be very cautious of this guy because he's gonna end up pimping you out. Now, it's never been said that he actually did that, but what is said is that he happened to come across an advertisement for a casting call for a Playboy Playmate.
Playboy was looking for the perfect girl next door to be the 25th anniversary Playmate.
Now, in order to be photographed nude, you obviously have to be 18 years old or have a legal guardian signature. It is said that Paul forged Dorothy's mom's signature and had a photographer take nude photos of her, which he had sent to Playboy in the summer of 1978. So not even a year after they started dating. So in the country of the United States, the legal age to be nude is 18, but in Canada, I don't know if it's changed since then, but at the time, the legal age of consent was 19. So she's 17 years old at the time, and he has somebody take nude photos of her and sends them into Playboy and forges her mom's signature. So that already is very shady. Not to mention, this guy is much older than her. You know what I mean? Like, once you get past the legal age, that's fine if there's an age difference. I mean, I've dated people 20 years my senior, but you can't be an underage girl dating a guy that, I mean, that's against the law. That is absolutely against the law. That's statutory rape. So in August of 1978, she moved to Los Angeles. Playboy happened to see her photographs and they saw a lot of potential in her. But they did take note that she was very shy. So when you go down to Playboy and you audition, you do test shoots, and the photographer said that she was an absolute beauty. Like, she showed up, had no makeup on, and was still just radiant. She was definitely a little bit different than the girls that were running the mansion at the time, but in a good way.
I can't think of anybody that I've ever photographed that come even close to her.
She was different in a very good way. But he did say that whenever, you know, she first did the shoots, he had to literally tell her each and every position. Like, okay, do this. Like, it didn't come super natural to her at first as far as how to pose. I mean, like I said, she was super insecure to begin with. But very soon she grew into it and she was very, very good at it.
Flew me out that Sunday. The first time I was on an airplane, they did test shootings with me that same day. They brought me up to Hefner's mansion that same day. It was very exciting, very nerve-wracking.
So after she moved to Los Angeles, she was actually chosen as a finalist for the 25th anniversary Great Playmate Hunt. Snider joined her in October, and in June the following year, they were married. So in 1979, she became Miss August for Playboy. It was rumored that she was going to be named Playmate of the Year that year, but for some reason Hugh Hefner thought she just wasn't quite ready to get that title yet, so somebody else did make Playmate of the Year in 1979. So after she became Miss August in 1979, she began working as a bunny at the Playboy Club in Century City, Los Angeles. However, she was named Playmate of the Year in 1980.
And now, our 1980 Playmate of the Year, Dorothy Stratten.
And she was so excited to become Playmate of the Year, and the two people she thanked the most was the photographer and also Hugh Hefner. And I think her husband didn't like this. He started to sense that the bigger her star grew, like her star quality grew, the more he was losing control of her.
I would like to thank my other half, my photographer Mario Caselli, and to Hef, who has made me probably the happiest girl in the world today.
Yesterday she was named Playmate of the Year. Would you welcome Dorothy Stratten. By golly, that's you. You really are a lovely young lady.
Hugh Hefner was very interested in her. He almost took like a fatherly role to her. Like, she didn't have a very close fatherly relationship with her own dad.
During that particular day, it was clear that there was trouble between her and Paul. She was kind of avoiding him.
It is said, so Hugh Hefner sort of became a mentor for her, and he saw her as a potential to cross over not just from modeling, but also to become an actress, which was a really big thing because Hugh Hefner was Hugh Hefner. That's huge.
When you see what happened to two of the people that you mentioned, Marilyn Monroe and Jean Harlow, and how their lives got messed up, does it bother you being a beautiful blonde and choosing the movies as your particular field?
Well, I just take life day at a time.
She was featured in certain episodes of Buck Rogers and Fantasy Island, and she also had some small roles in 1979 in something called American Thon and the roller disco comedy Skate Town, USA. And she got a lead role in an exploitation film called Autumn Born. But she also played a title role for a movie called Galaxina. I guess it's a sci-fi parody. So she was just really dipping her toes into the acting thing. It did seem that she really liked to do it. She did interviews. She was always very well poised, very gracious, very respectful. She handled herself really well. For somebody as young and inexperienced as she was, she did a very, very good job. And she obviously had so much potential, and so many people saw this. And Paul Snider saw this too. And he was starting to get scared that she was going to leave him. He was paranoid. Anytime she was on any sort of set, he would call and they would literally have to block him from the movie sets she would be on because he would just harass her. He would like be hyper focused, like he had to be there. Now, Hugh Hefner, like I said, became a very big mentor to her, and she had sort of been telling people that her and Paul were having a lot of marital issues.
Dorothy was not just a wife. Dorothy was a ticket to something that he wanted.
They got married really fast. I think their wedding cost $65, and it wasn't a very joyous ceremony. The $65 thing is not important. It feels like he just pushed her to marry him so that he could have a grasp on her, some control of her. It is said that Hugh Hefner reportedly would tell her to leave Snider, that he was a pimp, he was just bad news. And like I said, she knew it, everybody knew it. And she did start to be interested in somebody else.
Husband Paul Snider received a letter from Dorothy asking for a separation.
Her game plan was exactly the way she played it out. Get some distance, get some time, get your own money coming in, and then fade him out.
And that's a painful thing because it gave him a lot of time to start plotting and thinking about what he was going to do.
So in 1981, she began an affair with a director of a movie called They All Laughed. And his name is Peter Bogdanovich. I'm not very sure how to pronounce his last name. Like, they tried to keep it under wraps, but it is said that while they were on set, it was almost difficult for them to hide their relationship, their flirtatiousness with each other, because it was just like one of those like really, really hot romantic affairs. You know, obviously it was an affair because she was still married. Now, the 1981 movie was supposed to be her big Hollywood debut. She had done a lot of minor roles here and there, but this movie was said to be the movie that was really going to skyrocket her to A-list stardom. And I do believe if things had gone differently, that probably would have been the case. Now, Snider became very suspicious, and he hired a private investigator to follow her because he was certain that she was having an affair, which, to be fair, she was.
On July 30th, 1980, Dorothy Stratten and Peter Bogdanovich returned to Los Angeles. Paul Snider was waiting for them.
It's a little creepy to have your wife followed. But after this was discovered, they did separate. And it is said that she had sent a letter telling, it was basically like a Dear John letter, and she told Paul that she wanted a divorce. And she told Peter that she wanted a divorce, not just because she was in love with him, they were having this amazing affair, but because Paul was a bad guy. He just wasn't good for her, and he was verbally abusive. He threatened her. He had said in front of people that if she ever left him, he would kill her. And you know, I think people say things sometimes that they don't mean out of anger, but unfortunately he meant every word he said. Now, like I said before, Paul was someone who was always dabbling in these different get-rich-quick schemes. He tried to invent some type of chair that never went anywhere. But one thing about Paul that I did not know is, I guess he, along with a guy whose last name is Dale, I guess Paul Snider is responsible in part for Chippendales and for their costumes, because since at the time Dorothy was modeling for Playboy, you know, Playboy was very well known to have the cuffs and the bow tie and the little bunny suit and the ears. Well, if you think about Chippendales, they also wear the bow tie, basically shirtless, and they have, I do believe they wear cuffs too. And Hugh Hefner himself said that Paul stole that idea straight from Playboy. So that's an interesting piece of history that I had no idea about. Of course, Paul, this just seemed to be his luck in life. Somebody more wealthy and more business savvy than him came and took over the Chippendales business, as far as I know. That's what I heard in the documentary. And so he felt slighted again. He wasn't doing well. He had no money, and he was gaining less and less access to Dorothy's earnings. When she made Playmate of the Year, she won a $25,000 check and over $175,000 worth of prizes. So like contracts, I think you get a car, jewelry, things like that. And people were helping her keep her money separate from Paul. And so, like I said, he didn't like this. Every single day, he knew that he was losing control of her. And then when she began that affair with Peter, he knew for sure that he lost. So, like I said, she became Playmate of the Year in 1980. And then on August 13th, 1980, Paul Snider found a private seller in a classified ad, and he bought a used 12-gauge pump shotgun. Now, this was literally the day before he murdered her. And it is said that that day he had actually told friends, he had said, oh yeah, I bought a shotgun, and that he was getting ready to go hunting soon. And that he said it in a very cryptic tone. And everybody knew that Paul was a little weird, so they didn't really think he was going to murder somebody, his wife specifically. But again, hindsight. All of the signs were there, all of the red flags, the controllingness, hiring a private detective, being abusive, you know, being with a minor. Like, all of these things are red flags. They're definitely things that you wish that somebody would have said, hey, listen, you need to literally just like call the police on this man or something. I don't know what she could have done differently. Dorothy's little sister, who was 12 years old at the time, said that her sister had told her that she was going to meet up with Paul, and that she was going to try, I think she was going to try and get some of her things from the house and come up with some sort of amicable solution to this divorce that was impeding. But she said, please don't tell anybody that I'm meeting up with him, because nobody likes him. You know, Peter's gonna be worried sick if he knows. And she's like, basically, I'm just gonna go there, and then we're gonna meet up and go shopping afterwards. She had spent the morning conferring with her business manager, and one of the topics the pair discussed was the amount of property settlement the Playmate would offer her estranged husband that afternoon. So basically, like I said, it was to talk about their divorce and to make it amicable. She knew he wanted nothing but money, so basically she was going to offer him something, because he wanted to take responsibility for all of her success, because he's the one that sent in the photos and ultimately forged the signature of the mother. You know, weird flex there, guy. So I guess her attorney and her business manager had offered to go with her, but she said it would probably go a lot more smoothly if she went by herself, because Paul was someone who already felt like people didn't like him. Like, he had been turned down, he'd been turned away from Playboy events, he had been turned away from movie sets, so she just knew that if she showed up with 2 other people, he was going to feel kind of ganged up on, and he already felt that way as it were. So she said, I'm gonna go by myself. So her manager, her attorney knew, but Peter Donovich did not know. Her lover did not know, and she had told her younger sister, don't tell anyone else, don't tell him. I just want to get this over with, and then we're gonna meet up and go shopping. On August 14th, 1980, she goes to the house. She meets up with Paul at his rented West Los Angeles house at approximately 12 noon on Thursday. So Paul Snider had 2 roommates living with him at the West Hollywood condominium, and they had left earlier that day because I guess that they knew that they were meeting, and they wanted to give the 2 people privacy to talk and discuss the matters alone. And I guess she took $1,000 cash with her. She was going to give that to him as a peace offering, like, here's $1,000 cash. This is what you're gonna get in the settlement, and let's just move on with our lives separately. Now, we don't know what happened. Nobody knows exactly what happened. After nobody heard from them for a long time, his roommates came back, and I believe her sister grew very worried.
She just didn't come back. She didn't come back for hours. And I was very nervous. Didn't know what was going on.
And I waited and waited and waited, and she never came. And 10 o'clock at night, Peter was concerned, everybody was concerned. I knew where she went.
When Louise said that she'd gone over to see Snider, a kind of spear went through my heart.
So by 8 o'clock, both roommates were at the house. They saw that Dorothy Stratten's car was parked in the driveway. When the roommates first arrived, they saw that her purse was in the middle of the living room. They didn't see anybody. They didn't see either of them. So they kind of assumed that maybe they had made up and were upstairs making up, if you know what I mean. And she just kind of like came into the house. They saw each other in a passionate embrace. She threw her purse down, and they went upstairs, and that's where they were. That's kind of what they thought at first, but they soon would realize that that was just not the case. Like I said, they noted that the bedroom door had been shut, so they just sat in the house and they watched television for hours. So I guess they were alerted by Paul's private detective for some reason. I guess he had a suspicion, even though he had been working for him, that something was very, very wrong. So right around 11 p.m., so they came home at 8 o'clock. She had totally missed the shopping day with her sister. And at around 11 p.m., they go upstairs to his bedroom and they open up the door. And that is when they discover the dead bodies of both Dorothy Stratten and Paul Snider. Each one of them had been killed by a single gunshot wound from the shotgun. So obviously it was a clear-cut murder-suicide. Dorothy's part, she had been shot in the head. Part of her head was, I guess, like on the wall, and apparently it looked like she had ligature marks, so I guess she had been tied down, probably held at gunpoint, tied down. And also another kind of strange aspect to this is both bodies were naked. Now obviously you can assume, we can safely assume that she didn't want to be there, and like definitely didn't want to be naked, because why would they both be murdered naked? He probably forced her to be nude and tied her up. Who knows what he said to her? We don't know what happened that morning, that evening, but all we know is that he killed her and then he killed himself. After the autopsies were performed, it says, according to the police timeline, it says Snider had shot Stratton that afternoon within an hour of her arrival. So probably around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because I think she met him at like noon. And then it said Snider then committed suicide approximately 1 hour after the murder. So he probably took his life at around 2 o'clock. So they were both dead from, 1 and 2 p.m. and they weren't discovered till 11 o'clock that night. So literally, they met in 1977, and like 3 years later, they're both dead. And this young up-and-coming model and actress, her life was cut completely short because of jealousy and insecurity and a controlling husband who just couldn't let her go. Sometime after midnight in the early morning of August 15th, the private detective telephoned the Playboy Mansion and told Hugh Hefner that Dorothy had been murdered. Hefner then called Peter Donovich, who was absolutely, it is said, like comatose. Like he was just in so much shock. He couldn't move, he couldn't do anything. So after he found out that his lover was murdered, I guess he had to be sedated because he was in so much shock. Like he didn't even know that she was meeting with him. So to find out that she was meeting with him, met with him, and then was murdered by him, it was just way too much for him to handle. So he had to be sedated. And he had been working on this movie with her, keep that in mind, remember that. And he did end up finishing the movie, but it was like one of the most painful things for him, and it most certainly ruined the film. Obviously, the release of the film, I mean, people watched it, but there was such an air of sadness and tragedy surrounding it. Like, you can't imagine it would be celebrated. Do you know what I mean? And so they did cremate Dorothy Stratten's remains, and then they spread them at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery in Los Angeles. And Marilyn Monroe and Hugh Hefner are also in the same cemetery, in case you didn't know. So there's a few things about Dorothy Stratten that people don't know. So she has a huge legacy. There's been 2 movies made based off of her life. Stratton's murder was depicted in 2 films. In the made-for-television Death of a Centerfold, the Dorothy Stratten story, 1981, starred Jamie Lee Curtis, who played Stratton, and Bruce Weitz played Paul Snider. Bob Fosse's film feature Star 80, 1983, starred Mariel Hemingway and Stratton and Eric Roberts as Snider. And Eric Roberts is actually Julia Roberts' brother. Peter Bogdanovich was obviously heartbroken by this, but Peter Bogdanovich got very close with her younger sister. So when her younger sister was still underage, obviously her sister was murdered. And After she was murdered, allegations that she was having a sexual relationship with Peter came out.
Hafner went on to accuse Bogdanovich of having sexual relations with Dorothy's 16-year-old sister, Louise.
That the pursuit of the teenage sister was an attempt in a bizarre way to capture Dorothy.
The bitter battle concerning murdered playmate Dorothy Stratten is going to the courts. Stratton's mother and sister have filed a $5 million lawsuit against Hugh Hefner. Hefner claimed director Peter Bogdanovich was sexually involved with a teenage girl after her sister's death. She says that's not so and is suing for libel.
It's absolutely false.
He's been a friend?
Friend.
Nothing more.
Nothing more.
He brought suit against me for libel, but he did it in Louise's name. As soon as the depositions began, it became clear he was culpable, and the suits were dropped.
She denied it in interviews, and Peter was like, absolutely not. I look to her as like a daughter, or like I'm her uncle, a brother, that sort of thing. But then when she was 20 years old, they married each other. So she was legal at the time, but I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know how I feel about that. So Louise Stratton, Dorothy Stratton's younger sister, ended up marrying the lover that had been accused of sleeping with her when she was underage after her sister had been murdered. Can you follow all of that? Also, controversies involved in this case were Peter Bogdanovich wrote a book called The Killing of a Unicorn, and I have not read it. I'm gonna try and see if it's on Audible because I'm obsessed with Audible. This video is not sponsored by Audible, but it is said that he kind of inferred that she was depressed and that Hugh Hefner had a huge part in that depression and that she didn't want to be in that industry, and that Hugh Hefner, basically he defamed Hugh Hefner, and Hugh Hefner tried to sue him, or he tried to sue Hugh Hefner, but basically the lawsuits were dropped. There was just a lot of drama between the two men for some reason, even though neither one of them were the murderer. You know, I don't know. There was a lot of drama, and Hugh Hefner had called that the dark age of the Playboy time, I guess. So like I said, in 1984, Peter Bogdanovich's book, The Killing of the Unicorn, was published. 4 years later, at the age of 49, Bogdanovich married Louise. Bogdanovich had paid for Louise's private schooling and modeling classes following Stratton's death. So they were married for 13 years and got divorced in 2001. Singer-songwriter Bryan Adams, along with co-writer Jim Vallance, wrote the song The Best Was Yet to Come as the closing track for Adams' 1983 LP Cuts Like a Knife, and that was a dedication to Dorothy Stratten. And then there is a band called Bush, and their song called Dead Meat was also written in her memory. So for having such a short career, such a young life, she really did touch a lot of people's lives. I mean, there's been books written about her, movies, songs, which surprises me that I've never heard of that. But I will say, now that I think about it, I did hear about the book called The Killing of the Unicorn. I never knew what it was about though. So if you guys want to know more about this case, I highly suggest checking those things out, because obviously there's going to be a lot more details. But I'm trying to take your guys' criticism, your constructive criticism, and keeping these videos a little bit more short, a little bit more condensed, less of my own opinion. But I just thought I would cover this case, and I think it's tragic, and it reminded me so much of the Jasmine Fiore case, because she too was a beautiful Playboy Playmate sort of model, and she had an estranged husband, and this guy actually happened to be on Megan Wants a Millionaire. And you know, I guess they were married, they had some sort of falling out. He murdered her, put her body in a suitcase, and then I think he too ran to Canada. He ran to Canada, I believe, and then he killed himself in a motel room. It's all very bizarre. So immediately I really thought these cases were super similar. It's just, it's so sad. So again, like I said, I do these videos with complete respect to the victims and their family. Obviously, she has family members, and you know, Peter Bogdanovich, I'm pretty sure, is still alive. So this is with complete and utter respect. these are just tales of caution, and you know, this is a true crime channel. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please let me know in the comments down below if you are familiar with this case and what you think about it. Like I said, I've never heard of it before, which is crazy because I myself have been in Playboy before a couple of times, like the college editions, nothing special. But you know, I've seen that culture. I've been to the mansion when it was still, you know, when Hugh Hefner was still alive. I've been to the parties. I'm sure it was a lot different in the 80s than it was when I was going. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. I want to thank Ana Luisa for sponsoring this video. If you guys have any other cases solved or unsolved that you would like me to cover, you can always leave them in the comments down below. I am always open to suggestions for this channel. I love you guys so much, and please be careful. There are always, you know, resources and places you can go to if you are in an abusive relationship. If you know somebody, a friend or a family member, male, female, woman, child, whatever, in an abusive relationship and you see the warning signs, please tell somebody, try to get them help, because unfortunately things like this happen every single day. It still happens, and it's so tragic, and it is such an avoidable crime. These crimes are very avoidable. Please remember to always be kind to yourself and others. I love you so much, and I will see you very soon. Mwah. Bye.